The system notifies him that he has transformed another tragic fate into a positive outcome. It mentions that the fire dragon Salidas lost his horns in a battle against Javier, suffering fatal injuries before returning to his den, where he met his demise. The system further notifies him that Salidas dies alone in his undiscovered den, turning a tragic fate into a positive one. Meanwhile, he inquires if that's the case, but the novel only depicts him fleeing from his den. Simultaneously, the system alerts him that, were it not for his intervention, the Frontera couple would have vanished from this world, and the Count possesses diverse talents. The system informs him that he is now free from debt, directing all his efforts toward the work he had been unable to do in the past. He experiences happiness as he crafts a wooden statue of himself. The system informs him that he orchestrated these positive outcomes as Julian, originally destined to perish in a foreign land, is now recognized as the top student in his school. Julian receives his school certificate and his fellow students applaud him. The system notes that he played a pivotal role in saving numerous lives, emphasizing that he must earn his own money, to which he responds by requesting money. He humorously adds "give him RP then," and a message window retorts that humans are truly hopeless in romance. He counters, stating that romance doesn't put food on the table. He contemplates that what he currently requires is a skill, as the construction of the extensive sewage system is about to commence. He points out that the issue lies with the radius of the estimation skill, and the construction needs to cover the entire county. However, obtaining information from each area and connecting them poses a considerable inconvenience. Despite his level increasing significantly after participating in various projects, he feels that his progress has reached a plateau. The system notifies him of an intermediate design level 6 with a maximum design radius of 729,000 square meters. It also includes skill-exclusive options, floor plan featuring 3D indicators and simulation mode. He reflects that progress stagnated at a certain point, emphasizing the business principle of economizing on what can be saved while sparing no expense for essential needs. He clicks on the Level Up option for Intermediate Design Level 6, requiring 4,070 RP points. He contemplates that increasing the level will significantly expand the estimation radius. The system notifies him of the progression to intermediate design levels 7, 8, 9, and finally 10, resulting in an upgraded skill grade to advanced design. The system further informs him that at advanced design level 1, the maximum design radius is 3,375,000 square meters. He appreciates the value of investing 1,200 RP points into this advancement. The system then alerts him to a new skill-exclusive option called Construction Guidelines. He queries the meaning of construction guidelines. The message window responds, urging him, who has sought ways to reduce his workload, to test this revolutionary system immediately. He expresses skepticism, likening it to home shopping channels selling useless items. The message window suggests trying to access the 3D floor plans he currently has saved. He acknowledges that he will play along and activate the construction guideline while creating a holographic structure of a home. As the hologram of the house expands, he inquires about its purpose. The message window explains that the hologram is visible to him and everyone involved in the project, enabling construction workers to work with precision using the hologram. He realizes that this skill could potentially reduce his workload by at least 50% and decides to test it immediately as he notices a hole in the ground. Javier arrives and asks about the situation. He informs Javier that it is the location he will be digging and promises to provide details later, urging him to begin the task. Javier notices green lights inside the hole and starts digging with his shovel. He agrees with Javier's observation and sits near the hole, attempting to peer inside. He attempts to touch it and asks if he can try digging outside the green light. Javier takes some mud from the edge of the hole, causing the hologram to shift in that direction. The hologram admonishes them, urging them to do a proper job. Javier comments on the hologram being obnoxious, while Lloyd Frontera suggests that he may be too careless with his words, given that's his face. Javier jokes that no one will mess up while working, as they wouldn't want to see that face. Lloyd Frontera asks him to stop making such comments, as it hurts him. Javier inquires about the situation and wonders if Lloyd Frontera is going to claim he's a genius of illusion magic or that the hologram is a stolen magic tool. Lloyd Frontera considers the difficulty of further deception and asks Javier which story sounds more believable. Javier suggests the latter, saying it could be a necklace that looks the part when he goes around. Lloyd Frontera agrees, deciding to go with that story. Javier walks away, stating that he'll stick with that story as well. Lloyd Frontera, acknowledging there aren't many answers he can provide, asks if Javier has any questions. Javier replies that his curiosity isn't the priority at the moment, emphasizing the importance of saving everyone in the county. Lloyd Frontera expresses gratitude for Javier's belief in him and assures him that he will indeed accomplish the task. Bayern announces the commencement of the construction of a substantial sewer system aimed at preventing illnesses for everyone's benefit. Encouraging everyone to join in, he inquires about their motto. In unison, they respond with safety first. Bayern emphasizes the importance of avoiding injuries, even stating a stern consequence for those who fail to adhere to safety protocols during the project. Lloyd Frontera stands with Javier and observes that it seems like they are becoming more enthusiastic by the minute. He wonders what might have caused this transformation. Javier contemplates the situation. He explains that if the sewage and waste within the country are disposed of in the sewer, it will flow through the sewer pipes into the main sewer. While the small sewer pipes can be dug by Piporong alone, the main tunnel requires more effort. He asserts that what is needed is encouragement, heart flutter, and full power. Bai Bayang employs his power, and a worker digs a hole with a shovel. At that moment, Lloyd Frontera arrives with a hologram, urging them to continue. The workers are delighted to see him, and the mere sight of an angry Master Lloyd motivates them to work harder. One worker remarks that the face he has is scarier, while another mentions that Lloyd is shouting all sorts of curses, making him jealous. Another worker humorously comments that theirs is ugly. Lloyd Frontera becomes angry, screams, and demands they stop enjoying something that is meant to be a guide. He turns to Javier, expressing his bewilderment at their erratic behavior and wonders what could have prompted them to act in such a manner. The scene transitions to a rainy day, and Lloyd Frontera narrates that after a few heavy downpours of spring rain, the construction of the small sewer proceeded steadily over 3 months. He notes that due to the construction guidelines, the main sewer's construction advanced rapidly and began extending towards the north. After a while, Lloyd Frontera stands on the mountain with Sir Bayern and explains that the main sewer needs to extend past the field over there, where they will be constructing a sludge treatment facility. He expresses concern about the proximity to the place where the mastodons previously attacked and asks if it will be safe. Lloyd Frontera assures that with Bai Bayang frequently present, meaning the mastodons won't approach carelessly, they should still exercise caution. He instructs Bayern to advise their people not to agitate mastodons if they encounter them and to stand down quietly. Bayern acknowledges with an understanding. Lloyd Frontera mentions that despite the instructions, not a single mastodon was sighted, and he wonders if it's because Bai Bayang was present. Standing there, he faces a tree and initiates a game of red light and green light. Turning back, he invites someone to come over, claims to have caught them, and then playfully falls to the ground, expressing his enjoyment. The message box humorously questions who the true lunatic is in this scenario. When asked what's happening, Lloyd defends it as a form of play and questions if this isn't different from how people usually engage in such activities. Piporong arrives, observes the scene, and becomes emotional. He inquires why Piporong appears pitiful and asserts that he is genuinely enjoying himself. Piporong responds with something indistinct. Lloyd Frontera then questions if Piporong has observed something peculiar. Meanwhile, a group of workers congregates around a sizable hole. Lloyd Frontera joins them and inquires about the location and the nature of the discovery. Observing a decomposed corpse in the hole, he reflects that judging by its state of decomposition, it hasn't been buried for an extended period, indicating a recent event. Puzzled, he wonders who could have committed such an act and for what reason. Bai Bayang arrives at the scene, glances into the hole, and utters Baibong. Lloyd Frontera detects a peculiar smell and instructs everyone to dig a bit further in that location. The workers descend and commence digging, revealing numerous decomposed corpses. Lloyd Frontera contemplates the unexpected turn of events, realizing that such details were absent from the novel. This unforeseen development has shaken his certainty about the narrative. He contemplates that the only semblance of this occurrence lies in the chapter of Namaran's Barrier, where Javier mastered the blast. Reflecting on the black magic featured in that chapter, he acknowledges its familiarity and urgently instructs everyone to move away from the area. He identifies it as the corpse explosion magic, and as the corpses detonate, panic ensues with people fleeing. A pink magic engulfs the surroundings, prompting Lloyd Frontera to run, anticipating the advancing flames that pose a lethal threat. Determined to protect those under his employ, he formulates a plan, unsure of its efficacy, but he hopes to use the blast's impact to counteract the danger. In the midst of this chaos, Bai Beong positions himself between the black magic and the rest, acting as a barrier to prevent its further spread. Lloyd Frontera falls back, watching the events unfold. Meanwhile, Lord Solitas sits, grinding wood to craft a design. He hears a noise, turns back, ponders if it came from that direction, and senses the presence of necromancer's sorcery and corpse explosion magic. Judging by the explosion, he deduces that the corpse belongs to a creature more significant than a human. Contemplating whether he should aid the con artist who seems to be in trouble, he questions his obligations. Swiftly, Javier moves toward the source of the disturbance. Lord Solitas assumes the con artist will likely manage since the monster is heading in his direction. On the other side, Lloyd Frontera instructs Bai Beong to wake up. A worker points to the side and queries about a strange sight. As Lloyd Frontera attempts to rouse Bai Beong, all the decomposed corpses come to life and start following them. Lloyd Frontera observes them and contemplates the possibility of undead mastodons. He ponders whether they are buried more profoundly than those that exploded and queried the quantity present. The undead mastodons commence moving towards an attack. He grasps the Bai Beong and instructs a retreat, prompting all workers to flee the vicinity. Velarde Blanc asserts to the White Cavalry that today shall mark their final day, emphasizing the imperative nature of the endeavor for Her Majesty, their people, and Frontera County. Lloyd Frontera interjects, advising against the proposed action. He recommends a strategic withdrawal. Lloyd Frontera acquiesces, then shifts his focus to evaluating the terrain and contemplating the behavior of the mastodons. He considers potential strategies for creating distance between them. Turning to Sir Bairn, he inquires about their current location. Sir Bairn confirms they are in the field. Lloyd Frontera clarifies that there is only one. Sir Bairn affirms, prompting Lloyd Frontera to suggest using Peepodong to impede their progress. Peepodong moves towards the undead mastodon, initiating an attack with a Peepodong blow, delivering successive hits and forcefully throwing it away. He proceeds to engage another mastodon, employing Peepodong's elbow strikes, home run kicks, and tosses the adversary aside. Peepodong utilizes Plum Blossom's fist and follows up with Plum Blossom's rampant dance for further attacks. Lloyd Frontera observes Peepodong's actions, pondering the nature of the spectacle before him. Peepodong executes additional kicks and throws against the adversaries. He seizes some undead mastodons, hurling them away. However, the collective retaliation of the undead mastodons overwhelms him, rendering him unconscious. Enraged, Lloyd Frontera expresses his displeasure and verbally rebukes them. Peepodong regains consciousness and resumes the attack against the undead mastodons. Lloyd Frontera arrives with an elephant, positions a sword at its neck, and declares that he possesses one of their offspring, warning that it will become mere meat within 5 seconds. The onlookers acknowledge his presence. He inquires whether they are experiencing a peculiar mix of nervousness and anger, or if he alone perceives it. Urging a swift response, he suggests approaching before he strips off the elephant skin. In response, all the undead creatures roar and advance towards him, confirming his success in capturing their attention. Lifting the elephant onto his shoulders, he commends the quality acting, addressing someone named Pungdong. Reflecting on the situation, he recalls a solitary hint from the novel, a single line suggesting that these creatures, specifically mastodons, do not inherently pose a threat. The novel mentions mastodons exhibit an excessive preoccupation with their offspring. The notion conveyed is one of fighting for their children, even if they were to become undead. The outcome depends on their actions, and currently, the mastodons are not inclined to initiate an attack. Lloyd Frontera deduces that something occurred to reinforce this notion, recalling Sir Bairn's routine of caring for baby mastodons, which prompted daily visits from the adult mastodons. He surmises that these visits were likely motivated by a concern for the well-being of the baby mastodons. He runs alongside Peepodong, who clutches the elephant in his mouth, proposing to traverse the valley and take refuge in the forest at its conclusion. Seating himself on Peepodong, he urges them to proceed, prompting the undead mastodons to trail them. Observing their departure, the workers remark on his recurring role as their savior. After a while, Jigoming perches on a tree, vocalizing a song. Javier arrives, apprehends him, and reveals possession of the red sunflower seeds bestowed by Master Lloyd. Inquiring about the time required to cover 10 kilometers to the north, he seeks information from Jigoming. On the other hand, Lloyd Frontera utters a brief remark, glances backward, and contemplates their pursuit, realizing they are catching up. He employs his shovel to ignite fire flares as a counterattack. In response, they use black magic to retaliate. Acknowledging their overwhelming numbers, he considers the option of discharging a powerful attack, propelling it into the mountain to induce a collapse. He deliberates on the potential consequences. What if the attack fails to eliminate all of them? In his current critical condition, such an outcome could prove fatal. Piporong embeds a stone and stumbles, but swiftly recovers to resume running. Lloyd Frontera, gazing at the distant mountain, expresses frustration, exclaiming, "Damn it." Lloyd Frontera utilizes his scanning ability to assess the path, but an unexpected descent occurs, leading him to conclude that Piporong cannot ascend with his weight. Contemplating the situation, he seeks a solution and attempts to compose himself. Reflecting on his acquired skills, past experiences, and the amalgamation of these encounters and his estimated limits, he decides to take action, deeming inactivity a waste of time. Gripping his shovel, he advances towards the undead mastodons, advising Piporong to stay close to the wall while tightly embracing the baby mastodon. He contemplates his fear of entering a near-death state after utilizing discharge in the mountains. Spinning his shovel, he subsequently wields it to launch magical attacks against the undead mastodons, deeming this strategy as the key to a breakthrough. Activating mountain discharge magic, he unleashes fire flames upon them. The mountain fractures and fire arrows emerge. The intense heat renders his shovel too hot to handle, prompting him to abandon it and take a seat on the floor. The undead mastodons advance towards him for an attack. The system window notifies that the skill Supercharge has been activated. Utilizing Supercharge, he emits magical light, causing an explosion that engulfs the undead mastodons, and light radiates in all directions. Piporong endeavors to safeguard the baby mastodon. The system window notifies that he is indiscriminately absorbing mana from the surroundings. Contemplating the target direction, he decides to face forward and detonate the magic light. Intent on leaving the valley and Piporong undisturbed, he focuses on absorbing only the mana from the mastodons. The undead mastodons explode in all directions around him. Reflecting on a prior instance where he absorbed the mana of the Empress and everything around him using Supercharge, he perceives it as an advancement in his mana heart skill. The narrative shifts to a flashback, wherein Lloyd Frontera instructs Javier to become his bait. Javier, expressing reluctance, implores Lloyd Frontera to reconsider. Disregarding Javier's plea, Lloyd Frontera issues a directive, considering the use of Supercharge to charge his mana with the anticipation of leveling up. He regards the lunchbox filled with mana as a requisite offering for his impending level up. In an attempt to unleash fire from his shovel using magic power, he encounters failure and collapses. He once again employs his Supercharge power, recognizing that the surroundings are being destroyed. He acknowledges the need to prevent such destruction and focuses solely on absorbing Javier's mana. Javier observes Lloyd Frontera's actions and remarks that they're working. Lloyd Frontera will extract everything from him. The system window displays an error, indicating that this type of mana surpasses what his lowly body can handle. Coughing up blood, he collapses to the ground. Javier approaches, expressing concern for his well-being. Lloyd Frontera responds, suggesting that the webtoon may have depicted the wrong script. Reflecting on the failure, he notes that even then, it was possible to decide on the target and direction. The narrative returns to the present, and he attempts to eliminate the remaining undead mastodons by absorbing their mana power, asserting that all of their mana now belongs to him. The system window informs him that he has surpassed the limit of absorbable mana, leading to the forceful expansion of the mana heart. It notifies him of acquiring a substantial amount of skill experience. Overwhelmed, he coughs up blood, attributing it to the overpowering effects of the undead's rotten mana, which he distinguishes from poison. Recognizing the need for increased rotation and circulation of the awful energy, he contemplates the task at hand. The system screen communicates that the mana heart has sustained damage, and that strong mana has been utilized to heal it. Subsequently, it reports that the mana heart has incurred damage, and strong mana has been employed for its healing, leading to the growth of the mana heart skill. The system notification further states that the mana heart skill has leveled up, emphasizing that it had taken damage, and strong mana has been used to facilitate the healing process for the mana heart. He emits a scream and swiftly maneuvers between Break Mountain. The system window issues a notification indicating a skill rank up. Sword Expert Intermediate Level 1, accompanied by a 600% increase in physical ability. Rising to his feet, he observes the undead mastodons approaching. Another system window notification informs him about a new Mana Heart skill option that has emerged. Commanding them to kneel down, the system window notifies the availability of the Mana Heart skill option, Undead Domination. Consequently, all the undead mastodons kneel in submission before him, leaving Peepodong and the baby elephant astonished. Offering an almond to Peepodong, he suggests returning home. The system window communicates his newfound ability to dominate and control any undead with less mana than him. Stepping on them, he proceeds with a commanding walk. Another system window notification specifies that the dominated undead will faithfully follow all his orders to the letter. He observes the status screen, which indicates that the skill Undead Domination will only activate when facing undead. Gazing at the undead mastodons, he witnesses them obediently following him. The status screen notifies that the number of dominated undead is 308, and the remaining time until the end of domination is 40 minutes. As time rapidly decreases, he flees the scene with Peepodong and the baby elephant, screaming while running. The countdown reaches 17 minutes and 16 seconds when, at that moment, time expires. In a protective move, he shields Peepodong and the baby elephant. He cradles them as Jigoming's net web grabs hold of him, lifting all of them up while the gathered undead remain below. Javier, positioned on the back of Jigoming, employs his master sword magic and instructs Jigoming to depart. Jigoming questions the action, and they take flight from the scene. With Javier standing on his back, he employs his magic to attack the undead below. Lloyd Frontera, witnessing this, becomes shocked and frightened. He initiates the collapse of the mountain, causing it to fall upon them, and they unleash black magic all around. Observing this, Lloyd Frontera descends and lands on top of the hill, wearing a smile as he expresses gratitude to Javier for saving him. Javier questions the sincerity of Lloyd Frontera's smile and emphasizes that, as his escort knight, he must remain by his side. Inquiring about what he said and told him, Lloyd Frontera explains that he got angry when Javier mentioned it wouldn't be dangerous, urging him to focus on cutting the rebars instead. Javier reveals that, while riding on Sir Jigoming on the way there, he evacuated all the workers and acted as bait himself. Disputing this, Lloyd Frontera claims he was merely luring the undead into a corner to eliminate them all at once. Javier queries if Lloyd Frontera succeeded in that endeavor, prompting Lloyd Frontera to question why Javier keeps asking questions when he witnessed the entire sequence of events. Javier, frustrated, screams and insists that he wants Lloyd Frontera to be self-aware of his actions. Javier questions what Lloyd Frontera believes will happen to the country if he is absent, emphasizing the potential peril to apartment buildings, sewers, and the inhabitants at large. Stressing the weight of numerous lives on Lloyd Frontera's shoulders, Javier urges him to prioritize self-care. In response, Lloyd Frontera inquires if Javier implies that it's acceptable for others to perish as long as he remains unharmed. Javier clarifies that this is not his intention. He simply implores Lloyd Frontera to avoid putting himself in harm's way. Lloyd Frontera challenges Javier's perspective, questioning what would have transpired if he had refrained from doing so and whether he believes everyone would have been safe from the relentless undead. Javier contends that a progressive retreat, coupled with the defense of the White Cavalry and the strength of the county's soldiers, offered an alternative approach. Lloyd Frontera dismisses this as a mere assumption and queries how Javier can guarantee that no casualties would occur, challenging whether he comprehends the sensation of facing death after exerting maximum effort. Javier maintains that Lloyd Frontera is the most crucial individual in the county, asserting that the county belongs to him and everyone within it is an extension of himself. He inquires who will protect what belongs to him if he does not take on that responsibility. Javier questions if Lloyd Frontera intends to continue exposing himself to perilous situations in the future. Lloyd Frontera affirms that indeed he plans to do so and ensure that he receives adequate compensation for the risks involved. Javier conveys his willingness for Lloyd Frontera to pursue his choices as long as he remains by his side. The system window provides notifications indicating that Javier's cheerfulness has increased by plus 15 points, positive sentiments towards him have risen by plus 23 points, and their relationship has significantly improved, resulting in a bonus RP of plus 270, with a total RP of 3,140. The system further conveys that Javier's opinion of Lloyd Frontera has elevated to someone he needs to protect and someone he respects. It discloses that Javier is now resolute in his determination to willingly sacrifice himself if Lloyd Frontera faces the peril of death. Lloyd Frontera responds, stating that there was no need for Javier to go to such lengths. Javier inquires about what Lloyd Frontera is talking about. Lloyd Frontera responds, suggesting that Javier can feign ignorance if he desires. He questions who Javier believes is behind the mastodons and ponders if this could be retaliation from Isfahan due to the reversal of the monster domino against them. Lloyd Frontera contends that, based on his knowledge, Isfahan lacks a necromancer capable of orchestrating such a feat. Reflecting on the information mentioned in the novel, he asserts that Isfahan typically engages in physical combat, making it unlikely for them to resort to tactics like this, with the only reference to black magic being Namaran's barrier. Deciding to halt all ongoing work temporarily, Lloyd Frontera proposes a search for clues. Javier acknowledges the directive with an understanding. Lloyd Frontera reflects on Namaran's barrier, contemplating the chapter related to that location. He believes he has a rough sense of the situation, but recognizes the need for concrete evidence to hold accountable those responsible for the destruction of his assets. After a while, the workers commence digging into the hole and extracting mud from it using buckets. Lloyd Frontera and Javier stand up to observe the ongoing activities. Javier remarks that it feels like searching for a needle in the desert. Lloyd Frontera acknowledges the challenge, affirming that they must continue the process since construction cannot proceed with potential hazards in place. He is confident that what they seek is somewhere in the vicinity, specifically the medium of sorcery used for black magic. At that moment, a worker approaches, addressing Master Lloyd Frontera and informing him that Count Cremo has arrived from the west. Lloyd Frontera questions the unexpected visit, asking why Count Cremo is present at this moment. After a while, inside the palace, Count Cremo sits with his daughter in front of Lloyd Frontera and his parents, expressing his desire for Lloyd Frontera to marry his daughter. Lloyd Frontera apologizes, stating that she is not the type he typically goes for. Count Cremo responds that Lloyd Frontera is not the type his daughter usually goes for either and reiterates his request for them to marry. Lloyd Frontera finds the proposal abrupt, to which Count Cremo explains that he dislikes beating around the bush and thought long and hard after Lloyd Frontera left. He considered whether there could be a better person than him as his son-in-law, but noted Lloyd Frontera's sudden rise to fame. Count Cremo expresses impatience, stating that there are many nobles eager to connect with the Frontera family. He inquires about a suitable date for the wedding. Lloyd Frontera urges Count Cremo to calm down, reassuring him that no one else has proposed marriage to him. Erox Frontera calls him, and he responds affirmatively. Erox Frontera presents numerous letters explaining that he had kept them and intended to show them later due to his busy schedule. Count Cremo dismisses the letters as insincere, suggesting that those who were interested should have visited as he did. He announced that the marriage ceremony would take place at the Frontera estate and proposed slowing down the process. He suggests slowing things down a little and expresses sincere gratitude for Count Cremo's high regard. He, however, asks for forgiveness, explaining that he cannot comply with Count Cremo's request. Count Cremo, at the age of 27 and still a bachelor, acknowledges that people may wonder if he has any significant flaws since he is still single. He requests the freedom to be a bit blunt. Javier struggles to contain his laughter. He intervenes, instructing Javier to stop moving around and questioning the source of amusement. Count Cremo queries if the laughter stems from the belief that the Cremo family cannot measure up to him. He denies this, gesturing to the surroundings as evidence to the contrary. Upon hearing this, Christine becomes saddened and expresses her willingness to do anything gladly for the sake of the Cremo family's advancement and stability, even going so far as to sacrifice her own well-being. Lloyd Frontera, however, contemplates that she might be getting married to the Demon King. Observing Javier's mana enveloping his body, Lloyd Frontera inquires if he is employing mana to restrain himself and earnestly implores him to stop. Erox Frontera interjects, expressing his desire to convey something meaningful. He asserts that while family obligations are crucial, he believes that the thoughts of those directly involved also hold significance. He holds Marbella Frontera's hand and expresses his belief that spending the entirety of one's life with someone is impossible without love. Erox Frontera emphasizes that, for the sake of his daughter's happiness, he hopes Lloyd Frontera will respect both of their wishes. Christine starts crying and Count Cremo, placing his hand on her shoulder, acknowledges that he nearly caused her sadness for the sake of their family's status. She declares her love for him and embraces him. Count Cremo inquires if she is genuinely that happy. He stands to leave with his daughter and expresses admiration for the people of the Frontera family, noting that he has learned a great lesson today. He suggests living with love, a sentiment echoed by Erox and Marbella. Meanwhile, Lloyd Frontera sits on the sofa and reflects on the happiness of not being married to Count Cremo, finding solace in the fact that even his own parents agree with this outcome. Observing Javier sitting aside and controlling his mana, Lloyd Frontera acknowledges that Javier did not laugh in the end, expressing gratitude for his earnest efforts, even more desperate than when facing the Gigatitan. In the end, Lloyd Frontera explains that rejections were sent for all political marriage requests due to potential dangers on the political front. They did not want to cause any woman misery in such arrangements. After a while, a man in a blue dress appeared in front of Queen Alicia Termina Magentano and remarked that it seemed that was the reason the Frontera family rejected all marriage requests. Queen Alicia Termina Magentano says she expected as much. Even if the Fronteras had accepted the request, the lady in question would probably have rejected it. She laughs and comments that Lloyd Frontera looks just like a potato after all. Concerned about his well-being, the man asks if he is all right and suggests calling the imperial doctor. She reassures him, saying it's okay and nothing serious. She then requests boiled whole potatoes for dinner tonight, and he agrees. She reflects that in any case, she should keep an eye on whom the Fronteras will choose, considering they are poised to become the most vital family in the countryside. She inquires about the letter they sent to Isfahan. He informs her that those impudent individuals insist they have nothing to do with the monster domino, causing a huge ruckus instead of issuing an apology. He perceives this as an apparent provocation against the Magenta Kingdom. Frustrated, she expresses her disdain for the old weasel and decides to wait until she holds up her sword. She declares that they will form an envoy delegation shortly and send them to Isfahan. She further states that all forms of letters will be restricted until that happens, and she speculates that he will include a potato in the envoy delegation. After a while in Frontera's palace, Sir Bayern places a goat head on the table and mentions they found this at the incident site in the north, believing it significantly related to the incident. The Frontera's family is having food at the table, and Lloyd Frontera asks if it's a goat head. Upon observing a design on the goat head, he recognizes the pattern from the novel's illustration. Realizing that the pattern corresponds to the kingdom with the Empress turning dark, he discovers something not mentioned in the book before. The Empress is turning dark, and the Nameran's barrier incident is undoubtedly closely related. He reflects on the significant changes since he got involved in this world. The Empress didn't turn dark, and the cause for the Nameran's barrier incident ceased to exist as well. He contemplates that the incident was only made possible by the refugees of the monster domino seeking refuge in Nameran, but those individuals are attempting something not in the novel. Realizing that he must prepare against this unforeseen development to safeguard his dream of a relaxed life, he identifies the dark sorcerer Canavard, who deployed Nameran's barrier and led everyone toward death, as the biggest suspect. Instructing Byron to resume construction quickly, he emphasizes the need for its completion before he undertakes other work. Byron acknowledges his command. Marbella Frontera inquires why he plans to leave for work when he hasn't been resting much lately. Erox Frontera asks about his destination. He explains that he is going to Nameran as he has some business there. With unwavering belief, he aims to find evidence and confront the challenges ahead. The scene shifts to Frontera County, approximately 10 kilometers to the north. There is a sludge disposal plant, and Lloyd Frontera instructs Pipodong to open the lid, which he promptly does. Lloyd Frontera bows in front of Solidas and states that he will be counting on him. Solidas agrees, stands on the edge of the sludge, performs a magic spell, and thinks come on up, Thesis, as he transforms into a dragon once again. He observes him and contemplates that the world will eventually learn of the story of a dragon who willingly utilizes his powers. The dragon hurls fire into the sludge with full force, purifying the water. Lloyd Frontera reflects on the notion that, for the sake of humanity's hygiene, the legend of the Thesis annihilating dragon, Solidas, will be known. Solidas replies don't tell anyone about it, questioning what this is all about. Lloyd Frontera responds, asking if it isn't cool, a Thesis annihilating dragon. Solidas questions if he's serious, stating that he has zero sense in naming things. Meanwhile, it couldn't be helped that he was a science major, and the system notified that all science majors worldwide had expressed disapproval. He successfully established the first collective waste system for the Laurasia continent, and thanks to him, the concept of public health is beginning to take shape. The system notifies him that he should choose between the red tissue or the blue tissue for a new title. He believes the title's effect is a 0% chance of infectious diseases occurring in his county, and he can effectively block diseases from entering the county. He believes he can now live with peace of mind. When Javier inquires about his plans to depart for Namaran, he responds that he would like to leave as soon as possible. He reflects on the idea that leaving without making any plans and gaining nothing would be a waste of traveling expenses. He contemplates that this place might harbor a villain, even though he claims it lacks credibility unless there's a decent excuse. Javier says, "Master Lloyd, look over there. What's all that?" as he observes numerous carriages. Lloyd replies, expressing a sense of foreboding about the recently rejected marriage proposals. He approaches his father, who explains that all the suitors sent their daughters, hoping that seeing them in person might change Lloyd's mind. Unable to refuse, he provided accommodations for them. His father shows him a card, indicating that he made number cards for the sequence of ladies who will be meeting him. Lloyd questions if his father is perhaps excited right now, but his father denies it. He simply expresses his desire for Lloyd to marry the person he loves, adding that at his age, he should already have grandchildren. He reassures Lloyd that the whole continent is wondering if something is wrong with his eldest son, but he insists that he's fine. The system notifies Lloyd Frontera is his new title name. He feels excited because it's been a while since someone made fun of him. He guesses that there are ladies queuing up to marry him. As he reflects, he decides to think it over carefully. It's not really the ladies, but their fathers, old men, are queuing up to be related to him, indicating that he's loved by older men. A servant enters and informs him that the first lady is entering. A girl enters the room and Lloyd Frontera greets her, saying nice to meet her, Miss Customer, though he means Miss. She looks at Javier and questions why the servant is sitting down while he's standing up. Lloyd Frontera responds, stating that it's because he's Lloyd. Perplexed, she asks what he is saying, to which he replies that he's Lloyd, bids her goodbye, and she exits. After a while, another girl enters as the servant announces the arrival of the second lady. Lloyd greets her, and she repeats her desire to marry him. She questions why the servant is sitting while he is standing. Lloyd reiterates that it's because he's Lloyd, bids her goodbye, and she leaves, visibly upset. Javier expresses his boredom, and Lloyd apologizes, stating that he is adept at understanding reality. The servant announces the entrance of the third lady, and Lloyd greets her as well. As he looks at her, he realizes she seems familiar. Reflecting on the illustration of the Iron Blood Knight, he recognizes her as Siluria Namaran, the eldest daughter of Count Namaran. Lloyd is taken aback, thinking that Siluria, who had been dating Javier, was expected to be a fixed heroine. However, he recalls that she sacrificed her life to protect the people of Namaran, leading Javier to experience heartbreak and shed tears at her untimely demise. He reflects that the readers became agitated in the comments afterward, deeming it too harsh. People questioned why everyone Javier loved and cherished met unfortunate ends. Many readers were drawn to this novel because the protagonist consistently experienced sadness and loneliness, setting it apart from other novels. She acknowledges that she knew it was disrespectful, but she came due to her father's persistence. She notes that he looks much better than she had heard. Lloyd apologizes, clarifying that he is Lloyd, not the person behind him. She responds, asking for pardon, but she is addressing him. She points out that the person behind him is the renowned swordmaster, Sir Javier Asrahan. Both Lloyd and Javier express surprise. She takes a seat in front of them and observes that it seems Javier has been troubled by marriage matters, suggesting that he must be too busy to think about marriage now. Javier queries how she knows that. She mentions that she observed it on her way here, noticing the construction of buildings she had never seen before and the development of clean roads in all directions. She remarks that he must be busy supervising all of that, given that she knows his goals. She indicates her intention to take her leave and rises from her seat. He refuses, requesting her to wait a minute, expressing his desire to talk to her for a while. He inquires if Namaran is currently facing any difficulties, such as a sudden influx of people. She complies, sits back down, and questions how he knows about it. He explains that around 4,000 refugees arrived in Namoran due to losing their homes in monster attacks, and according to his knowledge, someone brought them to Namoran. He curses internally, realizing that the barrier of Namoran is a spell designed to drain the life force of the people within it. The barrier was activated because the refugees fulfilled the required number of people for the activation of Cannavaro's magic. He reflects that despite efforts to gather everyone into their county, there were still refugees who reached Namoran, aligning with Cannavaro's plans as per the novel. He contemplates the grim outcome. If his plans proceed, thousands of Namoran's people will be sacrificed as offerings, and the Hell Knight, a harbinger of death, will be summoned. Considering the story's setting, he acknowledges that not even a high sword master can defeat a Hell Knight, as its existence is nearly equivalent to that of a god. This realization means he cannot prevent the annihilation of the entire area, and the situation is far worse than his initial concerns. Lloyd Frontera prepares for a work trip, and Javier approaches with a bucket filled with love letters. Lloyd questions why Javier isn't getting ready for the trip and what he has in the bucket. Javier responds that they are letters given to him by the ladies, and he plans to put them in his room first. Lloyd inquires about the content of the letters, and Javier casually mentions they are, of course, love letters. Javier comments that Lloyd didn't receive any, and Lloyd agrees. Javier places the bucket on the ground, takes out one letter, and offers it to Lloyd with a smile. Lloyd questions why Javier would give him something that belongs to him and urges him to get prepared quickly. Lady Siluria waits and walks away as Javier places the letter on the ground. After some time, they all sit in a carriage and head to Namoran. She inquires of Siluria Namoran whether she is a civil engineer. He confirms, stating there are a few types, and he will decide which to use after assessing the situation. She asks how he is aware of all the circumstances in their county. He explains that he simply inferred it from information gathered from others, given that Namoran is a city constructed on steep terrain, and it's natural for the sides to erode gradually. She expresses her gratitude for meeting him, even though they didn't marry as her father desired. He reassures her that he is pleased they can address the concerns that have plagued their family for generations. He considers the situation perfect, providing an opportunity to investigate Cannavaro and also earn some money through construction. He anticipates that this work trip will be productive, assuring others to wait for him as he plans to demonstrate the meaning of the phrase, "the first to strike wins." She observes Mr. Cannavaro, a business owner, using his own money to assist 400 refugees and consistently taking a prominent role in helping others even with small gestures. He gazes at a man selling bread, notices the logo on his shirt, and identifies him. Filled with anger, he considers him a hypocritical individual and vows to crush him like a crushed aluminum can, grinding his teeth in frustration. Count Namoran acknowledges that he must be tired from the long journey, praising the noble demeanor he exudes, foreseeing the Namoran family reaching even greater heights. He laughs as he approaches Javier, expressing the sentiment that, in light of the occasion, they should discuss a suitable day for the wedding. She responds, "Father, that's the bodyguard, Sir Javier, and Lord Lloyd is the person beside him." Count Namoran questions what she is saying, expressing confusion about the contrasting demeanor of the person on the left, overflowing with nobility, and the one on the right, who appears lacking in several aspects. She calls him rude and questions how a count like himself cannot recognize the true essence of a person. She acknowledges that Lord Lloyd may seem lacking in some aspects, but he is very wise and capable, emphasizing that he is not present for marriage matters. Her father wonders why Lord Lloyd is there, and she explains that he is there to help resolve the issue of their county's sidelands crumbling. Her father expresses relief, mentioning that he feared being embarrassed by his son-in-law's appearance. She addresses her father, expressing that his words are hurtful and inquiring if he can imagine the suffering Lord Lloyd may have endured receiving such treatment over time. She questions if Lord Lloyd is genuinely capable of stabilizing the slopes. Affirming her belief in his abilities, she suggests that they will provide the necessary manpower and materials, and he only needs to supervise the process. Her father raises concerns about the potential cost and the stability of the slopes. She reassures him, unsuccessful, she will compensate Lord Lloyd with 3 times the money spent on construction. Intrigued, her father looks at Lord Lloyd and requests details about the construction. Lord Lloyd, in anger, grabs Javier by the neck with his shovel. Confused and concerned, her father questions their actions, expressing a lack of understanding. They retire to their rooms for some rest that night. After some time, Lloyd Frontera inquires if Javier also observed the demon pattern on the shoulder of the individual in question. Javier confirms and specifies that it was a goat head. Lloyd declares that he will monitor Canavero. If they can establish that the pattern is linked to black magic and report the incident to Count Nameran, they can apprehend them all at once without taking direct action. Javier acknowledges his understanding of the plan. Lloyd questions why Javier looks so cheerful when discussing a serious matter. Javier apologizes, explaining that he was recalling the recent comment made by Count Nameran about him lacking in several aspects. Enraged, Lloyd attempts to punch Javier repeatedly, but Javier manages to evade every attack. The following morning, Lloyd Frontera ventures into the city and notices a gathering of people at a certain location. A person announces that everyone is free to choose anything, emphasizing that each piece is worth 200 copper, encouraging them to select whatever they desire. Observing this, Lloyd thinks, damn it, that pattern is being sold in the market, as he notices shirts with the particular pattern being offered for sale. Realizing the potential complications this presents, he becomes concerned. Javier addresses him as Master Lloyd, and he inquires if Javier found anything suspicious. Javier denies finding anything noteworthy, stating that all he observed was the individual sincerely helping the refugees. Javier adds that he intended to investigate the person's residence, but found it protected by an expensive magical lock. Although it would be easy to destroy it, he refrained from doing so, fearing immediate discovery. Javier explains that the pattern is meant to signify a wandering minstrel, as that individual is currently quite popular. He mentions that large cities are selling clothes featuring that pattern. He contemplates the necessity of finding the wandering minstrel and inquires about the process. However, he realizes that searching for the minstrel may jeopardize everything if Nameran's barrier is deployed in the meantime. Considering the lack of details in the novel regarding the magic used for the barrier, he acknowledges the difficulty in finding and preemptively stopping it. He ponders whether entrusting Javier to deal with the barrier is the only option despite the potential risk to Siluria's life. The thought of someone he knows dying is something he wishes to avoid. Recalling the term Grandmaster from the novel, he recognizes it as an entity surpassing even a sword master in power, a being capable of instantly eliminating the barrier and the Hell Knight. However, lacking knowledge of the theory, he acknowledges the impossibility of training Javier to become one. Javier suggests looking into Canavero, suspecting hidden secrets due to the powerful lock in use. Lloyd raises concerns about the risk of getting caught while breaking the lock. Javier reassures him, asserting that he has a reliable method to enter and guarantees success. Lloyd is urged to trust him and wait for him at their current location. Lloyd Frontera considers the necessity of anchors to prevent the slopes from collapsing, planning to drive them deep into the ground to fortify the terrain. He originally intended to use the shape of a wedge lock bolt. However, the challenge lies in the need for more technology to create an intricate helix. He dispatches a messenger pigeon carrying a message. He decides to send the blueprint to Corgidus first, realizing it will take some time to reach him. During this period, he anticipates that Corgidus will scrutinize and study the terrain. Lloyd steps outside and observes two people conversing while walking. One of them asks if the other also saw the new beauty at the distribution station. The other confirms, stating that everyone rushed over to catch a glimpse of her face. The first person exclaims about her exceptional body, and the second person agrees, noting that her physique is indeed attractive. Meanwhile, Lloyd Frontera eavesdrops on their conversation, questioning why they would discuss such matters in the middle of the street for everyone to hear. He learns about a beauty running a distribution station in Canavero, a detail not present in the novel, considering it might be one of the variables that he should investigate. Observing the crowd gathered to see the beauty, he decides to check it out. As he maneuvers through the crowded place, he apologizes and tries to move forward. People in the crowd express admiration for the beauty's body. To his surprise, he spots Javier transformed into a girl and selling something. Recognizing Javier, he uses sign language to convey his respect for Javier's preferences. Javier responds in sign language, clarifying that it's not a fetish but a part of his operation. Lloyd looks at him once more before walking away. Javier gazes at Canavaro, who whispers about the progress of the preparations. The vegetable seller responds that they completed all of them last night, and then Canavaro walks away. After a while, Lloyd Frontera reaches a high mountain and attempts to climb it. He plans to inspect the expected rupture line first, but he notices a skeleton's head there. He wonders what the bone is and questions if someone died there in the middle of the construction work. He dismisses the idea, realizing it has been recently buried, and examines the skeleton's details with his powers. Looking around, he wonders where the body is and why only the skull is visible. He discovers another skeleton's head and thinks there is one more over there. All three of them are buried 50 centimeters into the ground as he measures the distance through his skills. He ponders if it could be a deliberate occurrence, as the distance between each skull is exactly the same, suggesting they have been buried around the peak. On the other side, Cannavaro and his team members gather for a meeting, and he commends everyone, expressing satisfaction with their efforts. He asserts that their grand plans will unfold as scheduled. Lloyd Frontera observes dark magical waves emanating from the skull and realizes that black magic has been cast on the skull. This black magic is what will activate Namuran's barrier. On the other side, Cannavaro wickedly smiles and declares their actions are for the descent of the Hell Knight. Lloyd Frontera becomes enraged, stating that their plans are jeopardized. He absorbs the skull's powers and purifies them, noting the successful purification of one skull. He holds the purified skull in his hands and contemplates its significance. A gemstone emerges from the skull, leading him to believe that the skulls served as containers, and this gemstone appears to be the actual item for the sorcery. Holding it, he questions whether it is some jewel and proceeds to scan it. He ponders what this is as he notices an estimated value of 5 million for the jewel. He calculates that it is equivalent to Sir Bayern's annual salary. Wondering if the other buried skulls also have such jewels, he begins digging. Amused, he laughs and exclaims at the unexpected windfall, finding money in the places he excavates. The message window points out his heightened excitement, remarking on his focus being more on obtaining money than preventing the barrier's deployment. He dismisses the notion of the barrier, declaring it as money, free money. The message window responds with information about a skill level up, specifically the Asrahan Core Technique Triple Circle Level 3. He calculates a total of 30 and concludes that he now possesses the power of 30 Bayerns. As he fills a bag with jewels, he realizes it cannot contain the wealth. Delighted, he contemplates having enough money to make 30 Bayerns his slaves. He remembers that Bayern often coughs excessively, prompting him to say, "Please rest for some time. He's overworking himself." He exclaims, "Damn, that was so satisfying," and decides to raise Bayern's salary a little, planning to make him work for 20 years. In doing so, he believes Bayern will accomplish the equivalent of 30 years' worth of work during that time, and he chuckles at the idea. Moving to another skull, he questions how it ended up being used for such sorcery, pondering whether it met a natural death or was a result of murder. Regardless of the circumstances, he expresses gratitude for the blessings, bowing in front of the skull. Holding it in his hand, he promises to take it to a place filled with sunlight, hoping it can now rest in peace. He proceeds to gather all the skulls in a bag. Lloyd Frontera and Javier sit in their room at night, and Javier explains the reason he was dressed in a particular way. However, Lloyd refuses, claiming he already knows it all. He asserts that all humans are diverse, and not everyone can be understood because everyone has their own preferences. Lloyd adds that he understands Javier's unique preferences. Javier mentions that the entire city is aware he is a knight from a foreign land and needs to disguise himself to gather more details. Lloyd reassures him, stating that he already knows everything. Curious, Lloyd asks when Javier discovered his preferences, prompting Javier to shout that it's not the case. Confused, Lloyd questions why Javier is getting angry and whether having such preferences is bad. He wonders if Javier is looking down on everyone in the world who shares that preference. In response, Javier says that, regardless, he managed to enter the mansion on an errand while working at the distribution point. Meanwhile, he responds, "Is that so? Did he find anything beneath the mansion? There was another door that led underground." Javier explains that initially when he observed Cannavaro, he believed there could be no one kinder and more diligent than him. He continues, stating that's why he considered it a mistake to suspect Cannavaro. However, upon discovering hidden layers of doors, he acknowledges that his instincts were right this time. Javier asserts that he will obtain the evidence, no matter what he has to do. He replies, "All right, this is why he should trust his words and be proud of his preferences." Javier insists that he is trying to convey that's not the case. On the other side, Cannavaro angrily declares that all the Nectanium has disappeared. One of his team members reports that someone took every single one of them, while another mentions that this development has spoiled their grand plans. Cannavaro contemplates whether someone knew of his plans, but dismisses the idea, thinking that if that were the case, they would have come after him. He taps his hand on the table in frustration, realizing it might have been discovered by coincidence. An old man expresses his anger, questioning what Cannavaro plans to do, emphasizing that everyone gathered there because he assured them nothing would go wrong with the plan. Another person, with a scarred face, mentions that they invested a considerable amount of money based on his promise that the dark sorcerers would recreate the world, urging him to take responsibility for the situation. Cannavaro attempts to calm them down, urging them not to worry. He claims to have a plan and mentions that Nectanium serves as a substitute item for emergency situations. He reassures them that if everyone cooperates just this last time, the descent of the Hell Knight will proceed as planned. After a while, a water bucket falls on Javier, prompting another girl to exclaim, "Goodness, Miss Javier, what happened to him?" Javier explains that his hand just slipped. The girl suggests that Javier should go and change his clothes in the guest room that Sir Cannavaro has in his mansion, adding that all the men are staring at her. Javier agrees and says all right, while the men look at him and comment on her impressive body. Javier reaches the guest room and requests the guard to open the gate. The guard, impressed by her body, responds with admiration. Javier enters the guest house and changes clothes, thinking that he should be able to move around with ease now. To control his mana and fully hide his presence, he decides to let go. He jumps out of the window, moves forward stealthily, thinks about the door leading to basement level 2, and wonders how he can open that door. He gazes at Cannavaro and performs a magic spell, creating circles at the lock of the door, and successfully opens it. Javier considers that it's a different lock compared to the main gate, and it can only be opened by a certain sequence of mana. Meanwhile, Lloyd Frontera examines the bag of jewels and wonders if this is really all, speculating that there might be more buried in another location. He contemplates the possibility of activating Namoran's barrier with those jewels and resolves not to let it happen, deciding to search for more free money. The message window advises against using them for black magic tools, but Lloyd sees it as an opportunity for free money. Cannavaro enters the room, and Javier watches him closely. Javier follows behind and checks the room's lock. Using his magical circle magic, he believes it's definitely something like this and successfully unlocks the door. He enters as well and descends the stairs, encountering a long hallway where an undead charges towards him with the intent to attack. Javier counterattacks, delivering a punch that creates a hole in the undead's body, but it has no effect. The undead retaliates with a punch of its own, leading Javier to realize that it's not a normal undead. It operates on a completely different level compared to the ones he encountered in the valley. Seeing numerous undead approaching, he quickly retrieves small fork-like knives from his pocket and skillfully employs his abilities, confirming his suspicions about Cannavaro. Javier prepares to confront the undead, while behind them, a bald person stands at another gate, enters, and closes the door. Javier thinks the person looks like someone words could work on. He attacks the undead, slicing them into numerous pieces and breaking the wall in the process. He enters the room where the bald person went and throws him aside. The bald person pleads for mercy, and Javier mentions he has a question. He puts his foot on the person's leg, breaking it, causing him to cry out in pain. Javier warns that if there's even a moment's hesitation in the reply, the other leg will suffer the same fate. He asks about Cannavaro's schemes in this place. The bald person responds that he doesn't know the details, he's just following orders as an undertaker hired by Mr. Fall Cannavaro. He explains that he processes the corpses brought by Cannavaro through chemical means and is suddenly instructed to guard the place. Javier inquires about the source of the corpses, causing the bald person to become scared. The person explains that the corpses come from the trading post, where they send the bodies of refugees who died from illnesses. Javier remembers his plan to move his father to the trading post for treatment, feeling grateful for the potential improvement in his father's health. She expresses her thanks with a bow, and Javier thinks about the corpses, the skulls with jewels that Master Lloyd Frontera discovered, and all the undead he has cut down. Javier questions whether the bald person found it strange that the trading post kept sending corpses here. He declares the person an accomplice, breaking the person's other leg. Javier moves quickly, anticipating the discovery of their underground room. He considers the urgency of informing Master Lloyd and devising a countermeasure against their actions. After a while, Javier arrives home and calls Master Lloyd, realizing he has no time to waste searching for him. He takes his sword and quickly heads out, determining that he must make a decision and take action. He decides to attack Cannavaro by himself, thinking about Cannavaro and the others who discussed things he couldn't understand, speculating that they were all from the trading post. Believing the trading post to be their base, he breaks a window to enter and looks around,